So I've come to the conclusion with my studies of Scripture that total depravity is correct, but not in the Calvinistic sense. Let me explain. John 6:44, I agree. Jesus says, "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him." That's a clear inability on man's part. Man on his own will not seek God, will not come after God. Man requires God to draw him to himself. Otherwise, he will never come, right? But in John 12:32, Jesus says, "When I am lifted up, I will draw all men to myself." So it does seem pretty clear here that God is drawing everybody to himself to be saved and trying to reconcile the world to him. Now, Hebrews 3:15 says, "Today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts." Why is that warning there? If the effectual call of God is on us and God is calling you to salvation, you are hearing his voice, he is drawing you. If that is effectual and you can't resist it, then why does Hebrews 3:15 act as if you could resist it and you could harden your heart? Which means it seems clear to me that grace is resistible. Now, that being said, I do believe in total depravity in the sense that left to our own devices, we will not come to God. But there is a prevenient grace. I believe that John Wesley got this absolutely correct, that God overcomes the depravity of our will, gives us grace to be able to respond. So it's almost like a restored will, for a sense, right? Think of the passage of Deuteronomy where God says, "Today I set before you death and life. Choose life." Why would God act as if we could make a choice when there is no choice, right? And I think that the scriptures are pretty clear, where Jesus says, where God says, when Jesus is God, right? Where God says that he desires all men to be saved, or all people to be saved. I think that all means all here. I don't think there's any way that you can really get around that. I think it's a stretch of the text and manipulation of the text to try to make that mean all kinds of people. So, with that being said, I do believe that total depravity is true, but I do believe that God frees our will to be able to respond to him. Does that affect his sovereignty? I don't think so, and I believe that A.W. Tozer has is correct, where he says that God in his sovereignty has given man the ability to say yes or to say no. The King of Kings is not threatened in his sovereignty, in his power, in his ability to accomplish his purposes by giving me the ability to say yes or no. So if you do not believe that we have that ability to respond positively or to respond negatively, then I don't know how you deal with passages like Hebrews 3:15. Now, I'm sure there is a reformed response to this. I'm sure they're aware that this text exists. However, I think with just a simple, plain reading of Scripture, and that God means what he means, that God means what he says and says what he means, grace would be resistible. So, if you hear his voice, don't resist. Now, I do believe in eternal security. Separate video. Hope this helps. God bless.